Welcome back to the Move Beyond Accounting podcast, and I'm your host, Blair Cook. The MBA podcast is for financial professionals and aspiring financial executives looking for unique perspectives. In our discussion, we explore areas of innovation, inspiration, invention, intelligence, primarily focused at the office of the CFO. And today, I'm really excited to have with me an extra special guest, Brian McNeill, who's currently the CFO at Malloy University. And this is going to be a really exceptional conversation with someone who truly has been there and done that. First, as an executive of a large power utility in the United States, and now more recently returning to higher education as a enabler for the next generation of professional workers. So, welcome, Brian.
Hey, Blair. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
All right. Now, I'm probably doing a serious injustice to summarizing your career in that brief intro. So maybe you can kind of color in some of the blocks and highlight where you have some highlights in your career that really illustrate the roles you played in accounting and finance.
Sure. Thanks, Blair. Yeah, so a little bit about me. I think early part of my career, I spent generally building a foundation in finance and accounting. I'm going to say technical areas, from M&A, treasury, financial planning and analysis. So kind of first 10 years of my career was kind of building the toolbox a little bit, and a lot of advice early in my career around, get the basics, understand the technical. So in the second half of your career, you can then kind of apply those to business issues. So that's kind of what I focused on early part of my career. Second part of my time with National Grid was really then focused on applying a lot of that work. So I was a CFO across multiple business units within National Grid. So I had a lot of opportunities to explore different parts of the industry, different processes, different regulatory structures. But for me, the key has always been being able to apply a lot of the foundational finance and accounting that I worked on early in my career, but really applying it to commercial issues and helping broader teams understand the language of finance and accounting.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Maybe within all those roles, do you have a particular favorite and maybe why that was a particular favorite role?
Sure. So I probably have a couple I would point out. I still say to this day, I was in our treasury team and I ran our pension and 401k plan, probably 6 or 7 years out of college. So you're kind of new. At that point, we had just done a couple of big mergers and acquisitions. We were bringing a lot of separate companies together. And at that point, we were the largest search in the U.S. for pension plans. And, why it was my favorite, I've had a lot of good leaders that I've been able to follow and mentor in my career. They kind of gave me the reins to run the process and roll with it. So, being a fairly new to corporate America and out running a fairly significant process, with the support of a good leadership team, but out there running it myself was very, very stimulating and interesting. And once we put it together, then being able to roll it out, within the 10,000 employees we had back at National Grid and playing a little different role on kind of one-to-one interaction within the company was pretty different for me at that point in time and was very interesting. And then I think the CFO roles have been fascinating for me in each of the business units I've worked with. My approach is always to try and be more of the scorekeeper and as opposed to the partner and driver of strategy and beyond those leadership teams and help them improve the businesses. So for me, being in those complex situations and helping kind of teams deal with complex situations is something that always interested me and stimulated me throughout my career. So those CFO roles are always unique if you play them the right way. It's not just a scorekeeper in the cop. And I've always tried to be more of the finance business partner and helping those businesses run more effectively.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. And that's really the intersection of what we try to talk about on our podcast is that intersection of being a business partner as well as having the metrics and the numbers and the discipline behind it, which is wonderful. Now, maybe this is spin forward just to the more recent parts of your career. You've gone back to secondary education. What led you in that direction from the utility world?
Sure. Yeah, I get this question pretty frequently now that I'm out new to an industry and then getting to meet my colleagues. So, I was fortunate enough at National Grid, to have probably about 20 different jobs over my 30 plus years at the company. So I tell people I was fortunate enough to get a diverse experience base, all with the same company, probably 10 mergers
So
and
you ran out of
acquisitions
jobs
after.
essentially, yeah,
That's
at
right.
the National Grid. So you had to go
Yes.
somewhere else.
some would challenge whether I could keep a job over that time, but it was a different story. So I was fortunate enough to do that. I retired from National Grid. I had a great opportunity, and at that point, I did some made a bit of a shift. So left big corporate. I had a couple of family projects, businesses that were on the agenda for a while that I was able to spend some time focusing on getting them off the ground and moving along. So I really went from big corporate to really small, which was kind of cool. Um, got involved with a bunch of board of directors and advisory work at that point in time. But I've always throughout my career really enjoyed the coaching and mentoring aspect of what I did as a leader. Also spent a lot of time at the local universities, my alma mater, some of the other schools, advising, lecturing, spend a lot of time giving career advice to students, which is something I just really enjoyed. So I did a lot of that when I left National Grid at some of the local schools and really got energized again by being on campus with the next generation. So a former colleague of mine, the president of one of our local schools, knew that this role at Malloy was coming open and thought I'd be a great fit for it. And to be honest, I was really enjoying in a retirement and doing the advisory work. So it was a bit of a balance. But, as I get in and talk to the president and the team, it became really apparent to me there's a lot of parallels what's going on in the utility industry with the transformation to the clean energy economy that's been going on for the last 10 years and really picked up steam. You're seeing that in higher education today. It's a pretty big transition going on and just kind of at that inflection point moving forward. So I saw a lot of parallels professionally to what I've done in the past. Uh, but for me, the motivation has changed quite a bit. Um, early days, the financial compensation was an important motivator for most, including myself. Now it's a little different motivators. I had the opportunity to really think about what I wanted to do, and what was motivating me today is much different than what was motivating me in the past. I reflected a little bit when we were having a chat last week. I've been fortunate to have a lot of good mentors and coaches throughout my career. And I think back to my father, who was a pretty successful commodity trader on Wall Street for years. Now, started in a mailroom, worked up to be one of the head traders at one of the big firms. So, very successful career. But as I reflected and I saw it growing up, he was always so involved in everything else outside of Wall Street. He was on all the
Mm.
boards, started all of the boards at my high school, my sister's schools, huge participant in all of the charity work in our neighborhoods. And for me, he always did it. We always thought he was crazy busy. But as I reflected on it, he was always giving back and he was always trying to contribute. And he always did it in a humble and modest way. So he wasn't looking for the notoriety, he just did it. So it had an impact on me. So I was like, I spent a decent amount of my career in Catholic schools growing up. So part of the reason for coming back was school needed some help. Um, Given time to give back a little bit is my motivation and help the school and the industry a little bit make that transition so that we have a good foundation for the next generation moving forward.
A lot of financial professionals have, they've been cruising along for the first couple of years in their career, or even 5, 10 years into their career, and they want to get to that next level. But they hear about this idea of a coach or a mentor or somebody to kind of a sponsor, take them underneath their wing. Well, what would you suggest are some of the biggest benefits you've had from working with mentors and I don't know if you said coaches or not, but what are the benefits of working with somebody else?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's critical to have sponsors and mentors in your career, and they come in a lot of shapes and sizes at different points in your career. But for me, I was an athlete growing up, so I always had coaches and we always had experts that we dealt with. So, being vulnerable to admit that you don't know everything and be willing
Mm.
to reach out and ask for help is not easy, right? Especially, you're coming out, you're early in your career, you're a little bit uncertain. And honestly, it doesn't really matter what point in your career you're in. You always need a mentor. You always need some guidance. At least I feel you do as you move forward. So for me, I started in a leadership development program at National Grid. So it was a foundational program that had supportive leadership training, technical training, as well as, official mentors that were sought, right, early in my career. So I had that exposure, saw the benefits. I was fortunate to get assigned some pretty good mentors. But the ones that are most effective are the ones that you evolve over time. It's people that you admire, that are in positions that you want to be in. Sometimes not. Sometimes totally different perspectives from somebody that you're just willing to be vulnerable with and talk to. tend to give you the best advice and have the biggest impact on you personally and potentially from a career perspective. So I've found my most effective mentors have been outside of finance and accounting. It's been more on the
Hmm.
leadership side, on the business side. Because when I made the transition from almost like corporate finance kind of roles into business roles, I knew the finance inside and out, but understanding how a utility works and getting out in the field and talking to customers and working with the engineers and that's not an area that I understood. So being vulnerable, getting out there, that was advice I got early on when I made this transition is get out of the office, get out in the field and learn what we do for a living is what they used to say. So
Did you have some work boots there under the desk that
I
you
did. I had
took
a
out
hat
in
and
the field?
boots, and it was one rule: never give me a wrench because I might break something. But I get out there and understood how things are working, which is great.
Yeah, the duct tape to tape the cords down, so when you're in a
Yeah,
meeting room?
it's one of the most versatile tools that they use out there in the field is duct tape. So yes,
Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. So I hear that the coach's mentor certainly broadened your perspective, and forced you and almost made you get outside of your comfort zone, is what I'm just playing back
yeah,
what I'm hearing, which is
yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, and the other thing I
Um,
would add there is internally moving roles and switching roles. It
oh
also
yeah,
helped to
well,
have a
20 different
sponsor, right?
roles.
I'll,
You saw
I'll
a
call
lot
them
of
a
different.
sponsor.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
so you need
wonderful.
that sponsor internally to help, be that advocate for you in the room when discussions around roles and promotions and development are happening when you're not involved. I found having that sponsor or multiples, as many as you can, sponsors
Mhm.
was also critical. And those are hard to build. I mean, you have to build that through trust. You have to build that through hard work and performance. But to the extent you can build those sponsors, which I see as a little different from a mentor, right? This is someone looking more job wise and helping you find those next roles that honestly you may not be the best, not the most logical candidate for. So as a good example, when I made the switch from corporate finance into the business roles, um, there were a lot of people that knew the business, just had gotten their MBAs, had the technical side, and were probably much more qualified than me to be the business partner for our field operations team, as an example. I had the finance side much stronger than they did, but not the business, the operations side of things. So the reason I got that role is I had a couple of sponsors that were in the business that, when they were deciding who to select for that role, they picked me as opposed to someone with a business background. And I do attribute a lot of that to having the sponsors kind of influence those decisions.
I can see how that's so important. I came from the utility world as well, and they had a similar sort of leadership structure where they would move people around. I unfortunately was on the outside of that group, and I was not part of the people who got the different opportunities. So that's why I ended up leaving and working in the entrepreneurial world. But that
Sure.
takes a special type of leadership to go out there and identify like these are my high potential candidates that I want to move around and give them different opportunities. So it sounds like Newton National Grid, you had a very evolved leader. How did you get into that pool of candidates that attracted their attention? They said, "Listen, we're going to invest in you. We're going to put you in the leadership pool and move you around the organization." What was
Sure.
the initial steps that you took, or was it by luck that you ended up in that pool of folks?
Yeah. Hmm. That's an interesting one. So when I graduated university or college, I knew I wanted to be in a business background. My father was on Wall Street. And at that point, it was, early 90s, right after a big recession. Wall Street was automating. So he was kind of discouraging me from following his path a little bit. So when I was looking at roles coming out of college, trying to get my first job, the leadership development programs in big corporates was appealing to me because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, but I wanted to get into a big place that gave opportunities. So, literally interviewed through the college placement office to get into the leadership program. At that point, I was Brooklyn Union Gas, a small gas utility. Um, and I was probably fortunate, as I said earlier, to be in that program because it was a 2-year program and there was 4 rotations over that 2-year program. And then probably for the next couple of years, as you're younger and you have that more experience, broader experience, and as long as you're performing and delivering, people are looking for you to join their team. So when opportunities come up elsewhere, you tend to get a phone call, you tend to get a tap on the shoulder and say, "Hey, listen, we have an opportunity. We think you're going to be good for it." And for me, that's kind of how I've bounced through my career quite a bit. Um,
Yeah, so
and,
people got to
and I'm
know
going to
you, your skill set. They got to know you. They got to know your skill set. People were out there actively recruiting you internally to work on their teams.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say you have to be willing as a person to take risks and be versatile. Like the taking risk piece, I always tell people, you know, if you do the average, I've been in a role 2 years on average in a role, right? And I always say the
Hmm.
first year you try and understand what's happening. The next 6 months you start to contribute a little bit. The month 18 to 24 you're starting to contribute,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're off to something again, and now you're starting from ground zero where it's, oh crap, I got to learn this again. So you have to be vulnerable, willing to take those development steps, which are hard, right? Because you then go from understanding a little bit, never really get to major contributions in a long-term process, and then you're off to another role. So for me, that was exciting, but it was also challenging because I always, I felt every other year I'm starting out from scratch and it's learning new and not being the expert. It's being, the rookie in a particular group, which as you're doing it isn't easy. But, 10 years into my career, I then look back and said, okay. So now I pitch myself very differently, that I have the toolbox of all of corporate finance. And I've been able to succeed in these many roles, all very different. So that kind of looks to versatility and the ability to be adaptable, which I think are, important today, going to be more important in the future. Those are some of the skill sets I think that are critical to current success and going to be even more critical as we move forward.
Well, man, you're doing that every year or two and transitioning to new roles. I mean, you're growing like crazy in an organization that's nurturing that kind of growth. You must be, as a personal attribute, you must be okay with being uncomfortable and being out over your skis as an individual. Is that true?
I would say yes and no, Blair. I got to be honest. When we do all the personality surveys, I tend to be introverted. Well, I should say I tend to be in the middle of all the personality, but I'm introverted. As a preference. I'm cautious and not a risk taker as a preference, right? So, but I think personally and corporately, I probably have different personalities. That's probably why I'm in the middle a little bit. I find
Yeah.
personally I don't take a huge amount of risks, but corporately, I would be considered more of a risk taker, but
Maybe
definitely
maybe it's
close to
easier
the middle.
because you were was it easier because you were inside of the national grid? It wasn't like you were leaving and going to different organizations. There was a structured plan and a transition between the various roles you had.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That's probably a good example, right? I took a lot of risk moving around the different roles, but within one organization, right? So that minimized the risk a little bit. Because there were times in my career, a couple of different inflection points where I had opportunities to leave, and thought pretty hard about leaving and what that meant versus staying. And it was always around those times that a new opportunity opened up internally that helped me change my mind. So, you know what? This looks good over here, but I'm going to, have an opportunity to do this and it's exciting and it's something I've been thinking about. So for me, that's always, I don't know whether it's worked out that way but it seems to be whenever I was thinking of making a move outside, something always opened up internally, which worked out for me.
Okay. Well, that's wonderful, and I mean, it's so rare to see somebody who has spent their most of their not their entire career, but most of their career with one organization. But seems like the choice of the right organization that allows that growth seems to be a key takeaway for me from that conversation. Let's flip over to the higher education part of it, because
Sure.
in terms of transition, we talk about industries under a lot of pressure with whether it's AI or the gig economies, or there's a lot of pressure being put down by government in terms of what should be taught in schools these days. Can you maybe give us behind the scenes, like the administration? This has got to be a hot topic as to does the need for or does the programming of secondary education need to change, and is it changing? And maybe just give us a behind the scenes. What do those conversations look like?
Sure. Yeah. So as I said, I saw when I joined Malloy University in New York, a lot of parallels going on between the utility industry 10 years ago, where technology is changing, the fundamentals of the industry are changing, consolidation in the industry, technology change, increasing in pace. You're seeing that now in the university space, right? So a couple of things, you know, what I bring is that kind of corporate lens to a university. It's hard to break into. I've learned it's hard to break into a university culture from outside the higher ed culture. So when I was interviewing and going through, it was clear that I had the technical and the finance and the strategy and the CFO skill set, but I didn't know anything because I wasn't a PhD that has grown up in higher education. So the cultural differences are very stark from my position. Now, the president's a little progressive here, Jim Montini. He took a risk. He wanted to change things up a little bit. He wanted a different perspective. And I think the main reason he wanted that is the industry needs to change so much. You need someone, and his ask of me coming in is take a look, understand the industry, understand where Malloy is, think about where we're heading strategically, and help shake the team up and help us make those harder decisions to better position the school moving forward. Is kind of my charge coming in from Jim. Coming in with a fresh set of eyes is helpful in some respects because you come in and, I'll talk out of school a little bit. We're a smaller university with 2,000 students 5 years ago. We're 5,000 students today. So significant growth. We're mostly a commuter school, so most of the students are driving, 95% of the students are driving to campus every day from within 50 miles of the campus. A lot of the foundational systems and processes have not changed from the 2000 person school. So the opportunities for automation, data, analytics, process improvement are significant opportunities. We have a lot of them to kind of, I'm going to say, take a smaller mom and pop shop mentality and bring it into the 21st century here. So a lot of good opportunities there. But I think structurally, in education, and we debate a lot, the traditional 4-year degree is still valuable. We believe that's the foundation of education, the right foundation of education for students. However, the debate is stronger than ever. Is it really? Do you
Mm.
need a 4-year degree? Do you need a 3-year degree? Do you need a 2-year degree supplemented by more technical training, certificate training? Our school is very heavy in nursing and health sciences. So that's 70% of our enrollment. So we're very health sciences focused. So in that industry now, with the specializations going on, there's more value from an ROI and probably from an education for someone getting an associate's degree, getting their nursing degree, and then taking 30 credits of a specific certificate that can take their salary from 90 grand a year to 250 a year with just an extra 15 to 20 credits in some of these real specialized spaces. So that's a big debate. Me coming in new, and I'm going to say your traditional universities that are 4-year degree universities, they're not so supportive of saying, what, that's not as important as it used to be. Maybe it's something different here. 3 years coming up a lot. 3-year education with a degree, with support from certificates. So that's going on a lot. Brian's opinion is too many schools in the U.S. at least at this point. The demographics in the U.S. are changing. High school graduates are declining 15% over the next 10 years. So the population college ready is decreasing 15% over the next 10 years in the U.S. So you got some fundamental challenges in the industry. I think there's going to be some consolidation. I think there's going to be some rethinking around traditional education versus, what happens. And I'm going to say that's just a fundamental education piece of it. The technology side of it's fascinating, right? So you mentioned AI a little bit. We're going from a very manual process today to, let's see, get to the pre-AI 21st century of automation, digitization is an opportunity there. The school's been a pretty early adopter of AI, which is good. I understand, 18 months ago, the debate was all around how can we stop students from cheating in the classroom by using AI? I understand was 90% of the discussion. That's never, it's not that it's never talked about now. It just shifted so quickly to, AI is being embedded, as an expectation in every class, every subject, everything that's being taught at the school is being rewritten to consider how to build the newest technology, whether it's AI or in the health sciences, a lot of other technology that's coming into play. And how do we push the education boundary on starting to bring that in and think differently about how classes are delivered, how exams and things are delivered? So that's really what's going on now. The pace of implementation and execution is just mind-boggling, right? I was around when the infamous World Wide Web was going to change the world and eliminate all of our jobs, right?
Yeah.
That didn't quite happen. It's changed
No.
everyone's job for sure, but it hasn't eliminated that. AI, in my opinion, is going to be similar. right? It's gonna change the world. Is it going to eliminate all jobs? No. Is it going to change a lot of jobs? Absolutely. Is it going to change, the way that we are having these kind of discussions? Absolutely.
Well, yeah, it's interesting you've been brought in as kind of the, I guess, the outsider, in a way to shake things up, and there's nothing I'm always fond of the quote that in the eyes of, beginner lie endless possibilities, in the eyes of an expert lie few. And when you're surrounded by a whack of PhDs at a university, nothing against them, but they're deep experts in their field of study. 'Cause I can imagine being an English professor, and you're trying to teach people how to read and write and interpret stuff, where AI does that all now. And so, to
Yeah.
what degree? I'm sure there is. I don't mean to make. I'm not poking fun at an English department, but I'm sure that's transformed how they're thinking. Like, you don't need to worry about writing reports and cover letters and all that, because AI does that for you.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine the amount of transformation that's going to be thrust upon secondary education, and are they prepared for it? And so, it's in part that you see that a little bit of as your role is to be a little bit of a lightning rod there, just to get people thinking differently, and bringing, like, this is the real business world out here.
Sure.
One of our primary responsibilities to graduate people who are going to be able to function and prosper in the world
Sure.
today.
Yeah. No, that's right, Blair. The stakeholder management within the university is pretty thick. We have a shared governance is the way everything runs at the schools, and some can consider that bureaucratic. There's definitely an element to that, honestly. But how do you navigate that? How do you manage through that is, what I've been able to come in and, I keep saying I'm new. I get to ask the stupid questions, right? I get to go around, I was fortunate enough to go out and meet all the stakeholders at the school, understand how things were running, how things fit together. And, what I find my role is facilitator quite a bit now, trying to, good example, health sciences. We're trying to build a new building on campus. They've been after for about 5 years. Um, we have a major health system that shares a fence with the university next door. We're in New York City, so fairly extensive healthcare, pretty close to within 20 miles of campus. I don't even know the number, but it's more than 50. Big hospitals available, so there's huge amounts there. But the hospitals now are trying. Healthcare is evolving as well, right? So we're trying to build an innovation lab, as an example. Right? So starting to work with some of the health systems, all the technology they're building, helping them by using our teacher, our faculty, our students to kind of help them build and research and commercialize some of those products that are being considered is something I've been pushing quite a bit and starting to get some traction, right? So it's good for the health services that they're getting their products kind of reviewed and improved in real life. It's helping our teachers and students, with that practical experience and commercial experience around. It's not just a textbook and in lab. It's okay. We work with products and help them improve products. I mean, commercially for me, it potentially has some value when we start to, commercialize some of these, whether it's a new technology, data analytics, whatever it happens to be. And there's potential financial benefit coming out the back end. So those are some of the things I've been trying to come in and think a little differently about and kind of push the team a little bit. Fortunately, the leadership team I work with is pretty progressive, and they're willing to take some risks and, let me go out there and have some of these discussions. We have a good development team that's been doing this for a while. So now we're just doubling down a little bit on it. So there's great opportunities. But there's also, there are 7 or 8 small independent colleges within 10 miles of where I'm sitting today. And we're in New York, the population's still pretty big. So there's, plenty of students to fill the seats. However, as I said, there's 15% less high school students coming out over the next 10 years. So they won't be in the next 5 or 10 years. And
Yeah, so you've got a
profit
couple of
margins.
Yeah, you've got a couple of significant forces, whether it's the declining enrollments or whether it's the AI taking away certain programs or what have you, that
Yeah,
all these universities are going to have to contend with. And of course, everybody wants to protect their university, their alumni, and all that other things.
sure,
So
sure,
it's going to be interesting. Just talk a little bit about AI. And every accountant and finance professional comes and they ask me the same question, and you see it all the
sure,
time. How do you think about AI? How have you incorporated it into the proverbial back office?
sure. I mean, for me, AI is just another tool in the toolbox. It's a new tool. It's a different tool. It's a pretty effective tool. Um, So as a university, we've kind of, as I said, we've kind of accepted it and trying to build it into everything that we do from an education standpoint. I think from a operational standpoint, back office standpoint, um, there's huge opportunities to improve process with automation supported by AI. So on my team, an easy example, our travel and entertainment process here and our vendor management process here is very manual, paper intense, inefficient. So pretty easy. A couple of companies out there that do this very well. We're in the process of bringing on an external software vendor, state of the art team. 4 weeks, we'll be able to automate the entire thing. And within there's an AI agent that allows for more effective management of teaming, making sure we're in compliance with policy and
Yeah.
automating everything, right? So I'm going to say I call that the basics, right? That's happening today, but it's being enhanced with AI. AI and the vendor management side, having all of our vendors in, having all of our contracts in, and sending the bot out to say identify the overlaps. Are we following contract terms? Are we missing discount opportunities? All of those things. I'm going to say the basics, but AI is really helping it. Because otherwise, it was going to be some an analyst on my team doing that work, trying to find it, taking a lot of time, and they might have found it. And for me, AI, I think of it as the intern, right? So I tell my team, you got to use it, figure out how it's working. And we bought some corporate licenses to make sure our data stays internally because there is a lot of worry finance side about the risk and data access is a real issue that everyone needs to think about. But if you buy some of the corporate licenses, our IT team's pretty good. They're protecting the data that's going in. I say treat it like your intern, right? You're going to put a request in. You're going to get some pretty good stuff back, but it's probably 60% of what you need, and then you have to work on the remaining 40% to make it presentable. But it's pretty powerful, and the speed of improvement is just mind-boggling how quickly the technology is improving and the applicability is getting easier to apply. So
Yeah.
that's just an easy
100%.
one for us. And we used it in enrollment, right? So we are enrollment team going out trying to find new students to join the university. We created two new employees, Mia and Max. They're chatbots that go out, and our enrollment this year was up 37% from
Oh,
last year
interesting.
when other schools are kind of going like this. Not all because of that, but a big contributor to just being able to reach people after hours, following up, personalizing messages, a lot of, and doing it very easily and it's pretty cost effectively too. It costs 50
Yep.
grand for us to put these in.
Yeah, and just trying to imagine how so the chat boxes are out there on the internet, looking at Facebook profiles, trying to figure who's graduating, engaging with them, bringing them in,
Yeah,
that sort of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
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 no, it's
that's pretty.
pretty remarkable stuff. And they're getting better. You hardly even know that you're talking to a robot, and it can do it in any, it can do it online. It can do texts. It can do phone calls. So it's super flexible. And I've been around a little bit, so our method of communication we're comfortable with very different from the students today. So as we're thinking about how we communicate better, it's emails. That's not what the students want. They want the Instagrams and all that kind of stuff. So it's
Yeah.
it
Well,
helps
of
there.
interest, you talked about, licensing one of the models out there. Like, who did you go with? And maybe more importantly, how did you make that decision? Do you go with Anthropic? Do you go with Google or Gemini? How, how did that process unfold? Because
Sure.
I don't know which one to pick. And every other week,
Yeah.
ones they're kind of leapfrogging each other all the time. So who do you make the investment in?
Yeah. I'm not going to talk about who we use or who we're choosing, but um, I'm going to say they're all, from my perspective, as a very basic user, they're all very similar in what they can do.
Yeah.
I think they all have their specialties and what's easier. I understand Anthropic is used pretty extensively in a university ecosystem. I think for a lot of back office reasons and technology reasons. Fortunately, I have a pretty good CIO that worries about all of that. But I'm going to say we haven't picked one as a university. We use multiple. It's just
Okay.
starting to get rolled out. So I think there's still a bit in exploration phase. Well, I've been pushing quite a bit to let's pick one and build out with one, because of the efficiencies I'm a little concerned about having too many happening on universities for the data and the security and everything else risks that it brings along with it. Um, But the key is for me, where's the data go and how's the data being used is really important for people to consider. Using the free public sites is fine if you're just asking advanced search questions, but if you start putting university data in, asking real specific questions, that's not protected. It goes out, you can use to train the models, and at some point it's going to get to someone who really shouldn't be looking at
Okay. Let's just switch gears a little bit here because now that you're back on campus, I'm kind of curious to know, if what advice you might provide to, say, a business student who's about
it.
to, they're in the program now, and of course they could specialize in a lot of different areas. What sort of advice what would you give to one of the business students in the school?
Sure. That's the business school is one of our smaller schools, but it's growing, and the students coming out of it are pretty gritty and doing great. So, but I've been spending, I'm a little biased to the business school, so I've been spending a lot of time with the team over there and the students over there and talking to them a little bit. So I think, when I talk to students, there's probably three or four key areas of advice that I share with them. I think, as a liberal arts school, I do believe in the foundation of a good liberal arts foundation for students to have. I spend a lot of time with sophomores for some reason because they're thinking about internships. Those first couple of years are pretty heavy. Probably 75% of the classes they'll take will be liberal arts foundational work. And,
Hmm.
a lot of people debate, is that really necessary anymore? And my belief is it is, right? And it's going to be even more important in the future than it is today because the ability to reason, to understand, the value, the ethics around AI is a pretty big topic these days around, what does that mean? What does that look like? So I think, really focus while you may not see the value of it today, the foundation of the liberal arts education critically important. Um, that skills development and the willingness to get a broad skill set and experience base, I've found that to work well for me in my career, so I kind of share that with the students I work with. I tend to tell them, don't say no to anything, right? You have a
Hmm.
preconceived notion of what you think you want to do. So you're a sophomore in college, don't say no to anything. Go to everything. Spread yourself too thin for the next few years. Meet people, understand things. At some point, you'll start to narrow down what it is you think you want to do. In reality, you'll end up someplace probably different than you think now. But open yourself up to uncomfortable situations. Get out to things that you wouldn't think you'd be interested in, and you might be surprised. So I spend a lot of time with freshmen and sophomore talking like that. Um, when I get to the juniors and seniors a little bit, but a little more focused around what am I doing and how am I getting a job. We talk a lot about networking and getting yourself comfortable, especially as this current generation is the electronic generation, right? They haven't had as many personal interactions, right? There are a lot of, very savvy electronically, but maybe not the best in a one-to-one situation or a cocktail party or a networking event, right? So I spend a lot of time with, trying to get them off their phones and off their computers and having some one-to-one personal interaction as much as I can. Because I just feel it's super important to be able to communicate one-to-one. Not, the two-by-two screens are useful and effective. However, at some point you need to build trust and relationship with people you're working with, and that's critically important. And I find you do that better person to person. So I spend a lot of time with them talking about that. Um, Communication is something I harp on a lot. I call it storytelling. You need to be able to storytell, whether it's about your background, your experience, say in financials. I go in very rarely will I put a spreadsheet up in a presentation. It's one of those I beat my team up all the time. We're out talking to the board, or we're out talking to customers. We're not allowed to talk about deficit credits. It can't be anywhere in the presentation, and you can't have a table of numbers more than a 3 by 3 matrix. Right? You got to make it simple. You got to know what the message is. You got to be able to tell the story, and kind of connect the business side of it to the human side of it. So we talk a lot about that. And then internships, the experiential learning is more and more important, I think, moving forward. Most of our students have 3 internships before they leave. They have a very high placement rate for postgraduate jobs or certificate programs. So we're in a pretty good sweet spot. Our ROI, which is a big topic in the industry, is pretty strong. Our tuition is lower than most. and our outcomes are higher than most. We were actually just ranked by Wall Street Journal. They just came out with, they don't do too many surveys. They just did one, but it was very focused on return on investment for universities. And Malloy, which is a little school in New York, 75th in the country, number
Well done.
six in New York. And you think that some of the New York schools are pretty good, and number one on Long Island. And why is that? Because it's primarily because it's the outcomes. So yeah, I'm going to say we're fortunate to be in nursing and health sciences, which is heavy demand and high salaries, which is
Yeah.
helping. Um, so that's our secret to success right now.
Well, you talked about the liberal arts part of the foundational
Yeah.
first couple of years. The third and fourth year, do you find that people are still specializing in certain areas? And if so, where are they specializing? Where do people see opportunities these days?
Yeah. I would say it's a bit of a transition, Blair. You know, I was talking to one of the students this morning who was, when he came to school, was thinking about being a computer science major and a programmer was what he wanted to do. He loved all of that stuff, and that's gone. Right. So he's got to totally rethink his world, but he's got to be adaptable and make the pivot. So he's got that skill set, but there's not very little less significant less demand than there was when he was originally thinking about it, because that was the area you were guaranteed a job when you went to school if you were a computer programmer, right? So he's pivoting now and trying to figure out how to continue in that because he likes that. So he's the AI, the data analytics, and those kind of majors are kind of morphing. Very popular now. And it is, and to me, data is power, data is valuable. So the whole data space, we're trying to come up in a business school with a different program around data analytics, which incorporates, a tool called AI into that whole process is very popular right
Forward just a little bit further, then as they get out into the workforce, do you envision that the career track for a white collar professional has changed since you and I went through 30 odd years ago? And if so, what would be the expectation if you were one of those students coming out in this world?
now. Yes. So I also personally I have a 25-year-old and a 23-year-old who have been through the process recently. So I have a bit of experience from the next generation coming through. So yeah, the key thing, I shared my story. I was an astronaut for 33 years before I left. A lot of jobs along the way, but with one company. I think those days are long gone. That linear career progression is just a thing of the past from my perspective.
Hmm.
Um, I think partially because corporate has changed and the industries have changed so much, but they're evolving so quickly. Right? We talked about computer science. I mean, that is just within 2 years has totally been turned on its head and is going to be something totally different today. In 2 years, it'll be something totally different. So for me, it's the adaptability that's going to be important and the willingness to probably have a specialization, I would say. What is your specialization? For me, it's, finance and accounting. But then how do you use and adapt that specialization to different situations, different companies, different industries, different projects? That's going to be what changes in the future is the the ability to adapt and change and the willingness to continue to get educated, right? Things are going to change. I would say I'm not the best computer person, but I can work my way around AI and whatever that next technology. I'm going to know enough to be dangerous. You need to be willing to continue to keep your skills sharp and adapt and accept all of the new improved technologies and figure out how you can use those to do whatever it is you happen to do better.
Yeah. So lifelong learner at this point,
Yeah, nah,
which is
good way
what
to
we've
say it.
been our whole career. But in this day and age, I mean, like to your point, you're going to graduate, and 6 months from now, whatever you just learned in terms of technical expertise may be irrelevant because it's been made redundant or gone away with technology or what have you. So very
Sure.
interesting. Well, let's see if we can bring this in for a landing. I'll ask you one
Okay.
last question here to kind of wrap up our conversation, and maybe this is a little bit of personal advice. And I'm kind of curious to know what is the secret of your own personal success. You've obviously had a lot of success during your career, but maybe just tell me something personal about yourself as to what gets you up and what gets you going, and what's led to the career that you're in the latter stages, but not done yet.
Yeah. That's an insightful question. I think for me, I've always worked for purpose-driven organizations. So at the utility, we were providing essential services. In university, we're providing kind of essential education. So believing in what you're doing is critically important. And I think, you say what gets you out of bed in the morning, you know, knowing I'm coming into the university today, with 5,000, 20 somethings running around that are trying to figure out what they want to do in their life. It's pretty easy to see what our purpose is and be motivated by that. So that's one thing for me. And I give a lot of advice. It's pretty morbid. I call it the tombstone exercise that I do with a lot of the students when we're thinking about, what is it, what you want to be when you grow up. But I would also say what that tells you is what's important, what's your personal values, what's important to you as a person. And as long as you're doing something every day that helps you drive towards what your core values are, what's important to you, I find that people are happier. They're happier, they're more successful. And that's been kind of the secret for me, is really trying to find those things where you're, like what you're doing, you can see the benefit of what you're doing, and that's the motivator for me. The financial comes along with it, the, accolades come along with it. But if you don't have the basics and you don't have the foundation in play, doing something I don't want to say something you love, because I love to play hockey, I love to play golf, I love to spend time with my family. It's not what I'm doing for a living, and my NHL days are long, long beyond. But you got to make sure you're really motivated by what you're doing. And I always find if it's close to your personal values, you'll be more motivated. So that's probably the personal aspect of this year.
I love that. Don't put the money first, put the values first. I'm going to put you. Speaking of values, I'm going to put you on the spot. If I was to follow you around for 30 days? What would I notice as your personal values? What are your top personal values?
Um, I would say sincerity, humility, and honesty.
Love it. Perfect. Well done. Well done. Well, thank you. This has been a another episode of the MBA podcast. My guest today was Brian McNeill at Malloy University. Brian, whether people want to contact you, or I'm sure they can go to the university, and let's get some enrollment in there. And I really
Absolutely.
appreciate you joining us for today's conversation.
Right. Yeah, thanks for having me, Blair. Enjoyed the conversation. Anyone wants to connect, feel free. Hopefully that was
Very
useful.
good. Yes. Thank you so much. Bye
All
now.
right. Have a great day, everybody.